took an inventory of how we were presenting the American Cancer Society to the business community. And what we discovered was, by no fault of anybody, everybody was leading with mission, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but probably 20 slides of cancer before you get to the value proposition is not the ideal dosage, if you will, of a presentation to a chief marketing officer who by slide 7 is starting to look at their watch. So what we did was we really tried to narrow down how we were presenting the organization, but the most important aspect is before we even did presentations, we decided it really wasn't about us. It really wasn't about presenting the assets of the American Cancer Society. It wasn't even talking about how relevant cancer was to the employee base or to the population at large. We really came in with, and I know it's become sort of cliche, the concept of consultative selling. It's become almost a bit of a cliche, but I think we really do believe it to be, in the spirit of solution selling, the right approach to corporate partnerships. So we actually don't present at all. We really start with asking probing questions. And it's really about asking companies what are their challenges, what are their unmet needs. So that could be we have an issue with attracting and retaining millennials, or it's an auto company, we want to drive test drives, or we want to increase basket size as a retailer, whatever the particular challenge is. And we come having done some due diligence on the company in advance so we can continue to tease out and ask probing questions to see how a cause can be leveraged to address those particular issues. It may not even be our cause at the end of the day, but ultimately we obviously have enlightened self-interest. We want it to be about American Cancer Society, but we're really trying to match our assets because, I mean, it's a very binary conversation. If you go in pitching, hey, we want to talk to you about sponsoring making strides against breast cancer. Either they're interested or they're not. It'll be a very short conversation. We don't want to be transactional. We really want to be involved in a solution to a business problem by leveraging the American Cancer Society, the cause, and our asset.
There was a time when, we all have fundraising goals. We're all pushing hard for growth. You beat your goal one year, and oh, by the way, the CEO is going to add another 10% next year and the year after that. So we are really pushing for revenue. So at one point in time, any money, any partnership was a great partnership, and we would figure out how to make it work. Well, you fast forward and you have teams that are just killing themselves because you're trying to recreate partnerships for every donor. This donor wants science, so you make it fit for this donor, or another donor wants to plant trees, so somehow we make that work. And it just creates this level of exhaustion and lack of focus. And so for us, over the last 5 years, we have gotten a little more focused each year, and also this aligns with how we tell our story.
Trying to help each partner find their space in the sun is really hard. And I think sometimes we're able to do it well, sometimes we're not. And it depends on the partner, and I think what we've learned and tried to help educate our partners about is it really takes everybody under the tent to solve an issue as complex as hunger. And so, yes, we're gonna work with Coke, and we're gonna work with Pepsi. I introduced Amazon last night to Walmart, and I thought the world was going to explode, but it was hard. So, it really does take everybody under the tent. We do work really hard to separate those competitive partners into different people's portfolios so that the person who works on Amazon doesn't also work on Walmart. We do try and help people separate their, corporate partners separate their messaging and separate when they're on the calendar, but it's tricky.
With you. I mean, I know when I started, I remember looking up stats of how many nonprofits there were. This was in the early, mid-90s. And there were less than 1 million nonprofits in the US at the time. I think there's closing in on 2 million nonprofits right now. We're the only industry that I'm aware of that has not gone through some type of a consolidation. Everybody else is consolidated. They've bought up their competitors. They've gotten more efficient. So when I first started at CMN, we worked in the grocery business, and I was signing grocery store chains. There were 250 grocery chains in the US in 1994. Now there's 5 because they've all consolidated, right? Our industry hasn't done that, and I think it's hurting us. I think if I think if we genuinely exist to solve these social issues, if our purpose is to make the world a better place, we've got to get around in our heads be comfortable with the fact that none of us can do it alone. None of us are going to be able to solve these issues on our own. And so the more we get competitive with each other for dollars, the more we compete in the sandbox, if you will, for these funds that are coming into us, the less I think social good we're going to be able to actually accomplish. So I know I've heard of a lot of some good collaborations that are going on here. I would love to see this industry do more. I would love to start with my organization. I mean, it's a hard thing to do. We brought this up repeatedly in board meetings, and it's something that boards really struggle with. You know, they're looking for our dollars, our bottom line, our mission, our this. And I've got the benefit of having been at Children's Miracle Network and St. Jude, who in the boardroom, it's a lot like Coke and Pepsi. I mean, there are conversations that go on in both organizations about the other organization, and it feels like you'd be working for Coke and Pepsi. And I remember in a board meeting with Children's Miracle Network, right after I got back to the organization, somebody was talking about St. Jude, and it was that damn St. Jude. They're everywhere. They're raising money everywhere. And I said to him, I said, look, yeah, they're excellent marketers. They are a marketing machine. They tell their story amazingly. But here's the thing. If you talk to any of their doctors, their researchers, their scientists, they're collaborating with all of our 170 hospitals, and they're using those discoveries to help save kids' lives. So what is our purpose as an organization? Are we here to raise as much money as we possibly can, or are we here to save kids' lives? Yeah. And thanks. And so the board, I think, took a little bit different look at it, and I said, look, honestly, the work they've done in leukemia, for example, we should love them. We should love them. They're saving kids in our hospitals. And guess what? Children's Hospital of Philadelphia is also saving kids at St. Jude because of the research that they're doing. So I would love to figure out a way for this industry to figure out a way to work together better. I think we would be much stronger. I think we could solve some of these problems. And I think we would get the attention of some companies out there that we've all called on a million times. They've said no to us a million times. But if we could figure out a way to show a united front, I think we can make some real progress.
You know, we have played well in the sandbox in terms of collaboration around advocacy and education and information because it's non-threatening. We form great coalitions, right? It's when we are chasing after donors, the revenue side is we don't play well together because we become frenemies, for lack of a better word. Yep. And it's actually, to your point, that's not what we signed up for, right? We signed up to cure a particular issue or address a certain issue. I think that the macroeconomic forces in the nonprofit sector is not a mergers and acquisition mechanism that exists in the social sector, that exists in the private sector. And I'm not advocating for hostile takeovers in our sector.
Yeah.
But the opportunity to merge and form coalitions, whether it's on a campaign basis or even organizationally, does exist. And it has to be, you know, you talk about one of the barriers for solving problems we always hear is political will. We lack political will in our own sector if we're going to really be honest with ourselves. And, you know, we've had the good fortune of working with some international cancer organizations, and one is the Cancer Research of UK, a cancer research organization in the United Kingdom, and they actually merged with another similar-sized organization. And the reason is their CEO, one of the CEOs, was willing to step down. Founder syndrome is a big issue. If you have a founder of an organization, they put their blood, sweat, and tears into it, and so it's sort of out of my cold, dead hands will I see this, you know, be stewarded by someone else. So there is a fixed sum game that's part of this, and you know, again, we have to sort of step away from our own egos, and sometimes. And on the ego side, I know this sounds maybe a little crass, but we all think that what we do is special, you know. But the reality is so, you know, in our particular area, there are multiple disease states organizations, all who are very well intended, and they deal with specific kinds of cancer. We happen to deal with all kinds of cancers. And we do work very closely with them. They are grant recipients. We do joint research, some of the things that you had talked about. So there is collaboration. But there is a hell of a lot of duplication of effort. Yeah. And the opportunity for leveraging shared services, and, but we don't. And I think a lot of it is our own political will. So it really is going to be about us stepping up as leaders and showing, talk is cheap, is actually forming alliances with each other, doing campaigns together, not just around advocacy and education, but around fundraising, where we're raising something together to demonstrate that it's possible. Otherwise, we're going to be here next year and we're going to have the exact same panel conversation.
First of all, happy anniversary to Citizens
Yes.
Capital, and
Yep.
congratulations to
Congratulations.
Paula. I remember 10 years ago when 4-H started to come to this, it was all about, gosh, what corporate partners can we meet up with and kind of get in front of and rub shoulders with, and where we are today is so valuable networking with our peers in the industry and figuring out how we can partner together, how we learn from one another. It's a professional development opportunity for our team that we mark on the calendar every year. So thank you. The whole thing is always an aha.